They were surrounded on all sides, not metaphorically, not eventually,
Surrounded by uncertainty,
dawn
leaders
broke
were
over a
forced to
field of
decide
silent
without clarity,
armor and broken
comfort,
banners,
or assurance
and
of
with it
survival.
came the realization that there would be
Leadership here
no
meant
easy
acting,
escape.
while doubt
The enemy
pressed
lines
harder than
pressed
any
in from
enemy
every
blade
direction,
ever could.
a tightening circle of steel and certainty. Supplies were nearly gone. Horses stood thin and trembling.
Courage did not
Men
remove
spoke in
fear.
whispers,
It
if they
allowed
spoke at
movement,
all.
Despite knowing
Only
the
days
cost would be
earlier,
unbearable.
confidence had ruled the camp.
The men who followed
Victory
were
felt
not
close,
fearless,
almost
only
guaranteed.
aware that stillness
Maps
meant
had promised
certain
advantage.
erasure.
Numbers had
Every step
suggested
forward
strength,
carried
and
lives
pride
lost
had
behind
filled
them,
the space where
shaping
caution
survival
should have
into a
lived.
lifelong burden.
But war has a way of punishing
Long
certainty.
before the armies faced
One
one
miscalculation,
another, before
one
banners
delay,
rose and
one
weapons
enemy
were
move
drawn.
unseen,
No one involved
and the
knew how the
balance
story
collapsed.
would end. Only
Now
that
the
action
army
was
stood
demanded.
trapped inside its own assumptions.
This
Fear
uncertainty
moved
is what
faster than
transforms
messengers.
historical
It
events
crept
into
through the
human
ranks,
experiences,
settled into
rather
tired
than distant
eyes,
lessons.
The
and
past was
hollowed
not
out
lived
even the
backward with
bravest
answers,
faces.
but forward
Every
through
direction
fear,
looked the same.
responsibility,
Enemy standards,
and risk.
sharpened
This night
spears,
endures because
no
it
clear
mirrors
path
moments
forward.
where hesitation
To attack meant
and
heavy
action
losses.
stand
To
equally
retreat
terrifying.
meant annihilation. To wait meant slow death by hunger and despair. The men understood this, even if no one said
The
it
cost
aloud.
of decisive action
Commanders
does not
gathered,
fade with time.
not in confidence,
It becomes
but in
part
quiet
of
desperation.
identity. This story
Each carried the weight of thousands of lives, and none could pretend there was an obvious answer. History
Instead,
often
it
celebrates
leaves
bold
us with
victories,
questions that
but it
remain
rarely
relevant
lingers
wherever
on these
pressure
moments,
demands decision.
when leaders stare into the dark
Long
without
before
certainty,
armies faced
knowing
each
that
other,
every possible
conflict
choice
was already
carries
moving
disaster.
quietly.
This
Beneath
was one
years
of those
them,
moments.
Rivalries hardened.
As the sun
Borders
climbed higher,
shifted,
time
leaders
itself
slowly
seemed to turn
began
against
believing
them.
the legends built
The enemy
around
did not
themselves.
rush. They did
What
not need
followed
to.
was not sudden war,
Patience was
but
their weapon
choices
now.
stacking until
They knew the
confrontation
trap had
became
closed.
the only path.
They
the
knew
heart of this
exhaustion and
world
fear
stood
would do the
power,
work for them.
and the fear
Every
of
passing
ever
hour
appearing
tightened the
weak.
pressure, turning hope into a liability.
Rulers feared
Yet
hesitation
within this
more than
suffocating
bloodshed,
stillness,
believing
something
delay
unexpected
invited
began to take
collapse
shape.
from every
Not a
direction.
plan
Alliances
yet,
formed
not even
from
a solution,
necessity,
but a
then
question,
shattered the moment
a
they
dangerous
stopped
question.
serving ambition.
What if survival did not come from strength,
Each side
but from
convinced
sacrifice?
itself strength
What if the
alone
rules
guaranteed
everyone
survival
assumed could not be
and
broken
justified
were wrong?
every risk?
This was the edge of
this way,
oblivion, the
confidence
moment before
slowly
history
hardened
either
into
erased these men
overconfidence,
or remembered
blinding
them
leaders
forever.
to con-
And somewhere
Culturally,
inside that
war
encircled
became
camp,
familiar,
a single
shaped by
decision was about
stories
to
that
form,
celebrated victory
one that would
while
challenge
softening
fear,
loss.
defy logic,
Generations
and change
grew
everything
believing
that
history
followed.
favored bravery.
It would not be shouted
and
across the
rewarded
camp
those willing
or
to
carved
advance.
into stone. It would
Commanders
begin
trusted
quietly,
preparation
in
and
thought,
destiny,
in doubt,
rarely
in the
questioning
fragile
stories
space
that
between
omitted
surrender
failure.
and
Few
resolve.
asked whether courage
To
alone
understand
was
how
enough,
that choice
when
emerged, we
preparation
must step
quietly
back,
began to fail.
away from the circle of enemies, and look at the forces that led these
Political
men
pressure
here
tightened
at all.
as
Only
unrest
then can the
threatened
true
stability,
weight of that
and
decision be
rivals
felt,
watched
and
for
the stage
delay
set for the
signaled
battle that
weakness.
seemed destined to
Compromise
be
invited
lost,
challenge,
before a single
leaving
choice
leaders feeling
turned
trapped
desperation
by
into
pursuit.
motion
Forward became
and
the
forced
only
history to
acceptable
hold its
direction,
breath
even
as
as
the story
options
truly
quietly
begins.
disappeared behind them.
Now, here.
Each decision reduced
Long before the
flexibility,
armies faced one
while
another,
increasing
before
commitment
banners
to a
rose
path
and
no
weapons
longer
were drawn,
questioned.
the conflict was already in motion.
Once the
Its
campaign
roots
began,
stretched back through
retreat
years of
became
ambition,
impossible to
rivalry,
admit
and
without
uneasy
losing
peace.
authority. Resources
Kingdoms
invested
had grown
and
restless,
reputations staked.
borders had shifted,
march toward
and
battle
leaders had
felt
begun to
rational
believe their
and
own
inevitable.
legends. What followed was not sudden war,
Warning
but an
signs
accumulation
appeared,
of
but were
choices
dismissed as
that
temporary,
quietly narrowed
not
every
signals of
path
deeper. The
except
battlefield was
confrontation.
shaped by momentum,
At the center
not
of this
chance,
world stood power
and by human
and the
nature.
hunger to preserve it. Rulers feared weakness
Fear of
more than
losing
bloodshed,
power,
believing
combined
that
with faith
hesitation
in past
invited
success
collapse.
to drive events
Alliances were forged not from
Refusing to
trust,
imagine
but from
failure
necessity,
narrowed
and
every
broken
remaining
the
path
moment they became
until control
inconvenient.
quietly.
Each
This
side
collision
told
was
itself the
years in
same
the
story,
making,
that strength
where
alone
confidence
guaranteed
finally
survival, and that
met
bold action would
consequence.
prevent greater loss later.
Promises whispered
In this
by
way,
the past
confidence slowly
could
transformed
no
into
longer be honored by
overconfidence.
the present.
Culturally, war
The
had
future
become
waited
familiar.
patiently,
Generations
prepared
had
to
grown up
demand
on
its
stories
price
of
from
heroic
everyone
victories
involved.
and decisive battles, tales that glorified
Understanding
conquest
this world
while
matters,
softening its cost.
because the surrounded
Soldiers
army
marched
did
believing
not
history
stumble
favored the
blindly.
brave, while
They
commanders
walked
believed
toward
destiny
disaster
favored the
step
prepared.
by step,
few stopped to
carrying
ask
history
whether those
and
stories had
expectation on
omitted the
their-
moments when preparation failed, or when
Leaders
courage was
and
not
soldiers
enough.
alike were shaped
Politically,
by
pressure
beliefs
mounted
that
from
would soon
every
be
direction.
tested.
Internal
Their
unrest
convictions
threatened
would
stability
face
at
reality,
home,
not
while
in
rivals
theory,
watched closely for signs of
but in
hesitation.
survival.
To delay was to appear weak.
The
To
world they
compromise
trusted
was to
began
invite
to
challenge.
crack.
So leaders
pressure
pushed forward,
closed from every
convinced that
direction,
forward was the
strategy
only direction
now
that
met
remained.
fear,
Each
and
decision
human
tightened the
resolve
spiral,
prepared to be
reducing
measured in
flexibility
lives.
while increasing
To
commitment.
understand what came
By the
next,
time the campaign
attention
began,
turns
retreat was no
inward
longer an
to the
option
people
anyone could
inside the
publicly
circle.
admit. Resources were invested, reputations staked, and expectations set. The march toward battle felt inevitable, even rational, though it was built on assumptions no longer questioned. When warning signs appeared, they were dismissed as temporary setbacks rather than signals of deeper danger. This is how the battlefield was shaped long before the first clash. Not by chance, but by momentum. Not by fate, but by human nature. Fear of losing power, faith in past success, and the refusal to imagine failure combined to push both sides toward a moment neither fully controlled. It was a collision years in the making, where confidence met consequence, and where the past whispered promises that the present could no longer keep, even as the future waited to demand its price from everyone involved. Understanding this world matters, because the army now surrounded did not stumble blindly into disaster. They walked toward it, step by confident step, carrying the weight of history, culture, and expectation on their backs. And among them were leaders and soldiers shaped by these forces, men whose beliefs would soon be tested, not in theory, but in survival. To see how those beliefs held under pressure, and how individuals within this trapped army responded when the world they trusted began to crack, we must now turn to the people inside the circle, where strategy met fear, and human resolve was about to be measured in lives.
Then there were the soldiers,
inside the encirclement,
countless individuals
history
reduced
narrowed
to
from
one
nations
shared
and
troop,
empires
farmers,
to individual
craftsmen,
faces.
veterans,
Commanders who
conscripts,
once spoke with
all
certainty
united by the
now
simple
weighed
desire
every
to
word,
live.
aware that
They whispered
confidence could
stories
no
of
longer
homes,
hide doubt.
promises, and lives
These were not
paused beyond
statues
the
carved for
battlefield.
future glory, but men surrounded
Courage
by
remained,
consequences, carrying
But
decisions
it no
that
longer
could
looked
not
like
be undone.
confidence marching forward.
At the top stood leaders shaped by success. Victories behind them had taught boldness, sometimes mistaken for inevitability.
Each had risen through skill, loyalty, or ambition, and each believed, in different ways, that survival
Long
depended on
stillness
maintaining
forced
authority.
men to question
To
the
admit
myth they had
uncertainty
inherited.
risked collapse from within, yet pretending clarity
Glory
felt
and
increasingly
clean
dishonest.
victories faded
The
against
burden
cold
of
ground
command
and
pressed
empty
heavier
packs.
with every passing hour.
Heroism
Beneath
no
them
longer
were
promised
officers
survival,
bound by rivalry and pride.
only the chance
Some
to
believed
endure.
the situation was salvageable
Some
through
prayed
discipline
quietly.
and force.
Others planned.
Others quietly questioned
Many
whether
simply
obedience
watched
alone
unmoving
could still
enemy
save
line.
them.
Uncertainty
Old tensions
bound them
resurfaced,
together.
sharpened by fear.
Heavier than loyalty
Decisions
or
once
fear
debated
alone.
calmly now carried personal stakes, as survival
Everyone
and reputation
sensed
became
change was coming.
inseparable.
Yet
And
no
then
one
there
knew
were
its
the
shape.
soldiers, thousands
Trust
of them,
wavered not from
farmers,
betrayal,
craftsmen, conscripts,
but
and
fear of
veterans,
misunderstanding
all
what
reduced to
lay
the same
ahead.
truth. They
Discipline
wanted to
held,
live. They
stretched
shared
thin
stories in low
between hope
voices of homes left
total
behind,
collapse.
of promises made before marching out.
Silence filled the
Courage
space
remained,
between leaders
but it had
fearing
changed
loss
shape.
It was
and
no longer
soldiers
the loud
fearing
confidence of
erosion.
advance,
Unspoken
but the
questions
quiet
hovered.
endurance of
Could
waiting.
loyalty survive
Hunger stripped away
desperation,
illusion.
and belief
Exhaustion
endure
leveled
reality?
rank. In the long hours of
These were the
stillness,
people who would
men
carry out
questioned the
whatever
stories
choice
they had been
emerged
raised on.
next.
The myths spoke of glory, of clean victories and honored deaths.
Their doubts and
Reality
limits
offered
mattered
cold
more
ground,
now than
empty
any
paths,
strategy on
and the knowledge
parchment.
that heroism
As
did
pressure
not
tightened,
guarantee
Human
survival.
resolve,
Some
not
prayed,
numbers,
others
would
planned.
determine what
Many
happened
simply
next.
stared at the horizon, searching for meaning
At
in
first,
enemy lines
the
that
encirclement
refused to
did
move.
not feel like danger,
What united them was
but
uncertainty.
steady progress
Everyone
towards
sensed that something
army
had to
advanced,
change,
believing
yet
the
no one
enemy
knew what that
retreated,
change should be.
yielding ground
Trust
as
wavered,
weaker forces
not from
often
betrayal,
did.
but from fear that no one
Scouts
truly
reported
understood what
movement,
came
but
next.
nothing alarming.
Still,
Reinforcing
discipline held,
belief that momentum
fragile
favored
but
them.
intact, balanced
Each
between hope
confident
and
step
collapse.
forward deepened
This
trust,
tension defined
but
the camp.
control remained
Leaders
firmly
feared
in their
losing
hands.
control.
What they
Soldiers feared
failed
being
to see
forgotten.
was
Between them stretched a silence filled with unspoken questions. Could loyalty survive desperation? Could belief endure reality? Or would fear fracture them before the enemy struck? These were the people who would carry out whatever choice emerged. Their doubts, loyalties, and limits mattered more than strategy on any map. And as the pressure tightened, it became clear that the next phase would not be decided by numbers alone, but by how this fragile human structure responded when the trap that closed around them revealed exactly how it had been set. At first, the encirclement did not feel like a trap. It felt like progress. The army advanced with confidence, pressing forward under the assumption that the enemy was retreating, yielding ground as weaker forces often did. Scouts reported movement, but nothing alarming. Each step forward reinforced the belief that momentum was on their side. What they did not see was intention. The enemy was not fleeing, they were shaping the battlefield. Small withdrawals lured the army deeper, stretching supply lines and separating units just enough to reduce flexibility. Hills that seemed insignificant became observation points. Forests that appeared neutral became cover. The trap did not close suddenly. It tightened gradually, invisibly. The first warning came when communication slowed. Messengers took longer to return. Patrols reported unfamiliar enemy banners where none had been before. Still, confidence endured. Commanders interpreted these signs as desperation, not design. After all, the army still held strength, numbers, and experience. They believed control remained firmly in their hands. Then, routes began to disappear. Roads once open were contested. River crossings grew dangerous. Enemy forces appeared not as a single mass, but in coordinated fragments, striking quickly, then vanishing. Each encounter felt manageable on its own, but together, they formed a pattern that few wanted to acknowledge.
By the time the pattern became undeniable, options had narrowed. Attempts to push forward met reinforced resistance. Attempts to reposition were delayed by terrain and pressure. The enemy was no longer reacting. They were dictating movement. What had seemed like freedom of maneuver was revealed as guided motion, carefully constrained from the start. Hope lingered in fragments. Some believed a decisive strike could break the ring. Others argued the enemy lines were thinner than they appeared. Maps were redrawn, plans revised, confidence publicly maintained. But privately, the realization spread that the enemy now held every advantage that mattered. The encirclement completed itself not with a dramatic clash, but with silence. Enemy forces stopped advancing. They did not need to. Their presence on every horizon spoke clearly enough. North, south, east, west. No direction offered escape without cost beyond calculation. The circle was not perfect, but it was sufficient.
The trap closed
This was the moment
familiarity was mistaken for control, not lack of courage.